In the Arizona borderlands, Micah Sandoval never trusted the quiet. Every night, the former Navy SEAL checked his doors again and again, yet still slept on the floor. Then, one emergency pump repair led him to a rusted cage hidden near Silver Spur Ranch. Inside was Rook, a wounded German shepherd with one tipped ear and eyes that had seen too much. But Rook was not just waiting to be rescued. He was carrying a warning no human had believed. When clean papers tried to erase the truth, Micah had to decide whether fear was weakness or memory speaking. If this story touches you, tell us where you're watching from. Leave your thoughts below, and please like and subscribe to help SEAL K9 Tales reach 5,000 subscribers. Micah Sandoval did not trust quiet. Quiet, in the borderlands of southern Arizona, had a way of wearing a mask. It settled over the desert like a prayer shawl, soft and silver beneath the moon. But Micah had learned long ago that silence could hold its breath. A truck could coast without headlights. A door could open without a creak. A man could be standing where no man had stood a moment before. So every night, before he allowed himself the idea of sleep, Micah checked the house. Front door, deadbolt turned. Chain set, back door. Lock tested twice. Kitchen window, latched. Bathroom window, latched. Then he went around again. His house sat low against the desert, painted a color that had once been beige and was now simply the color of dust. It crouched under the wide Arizona sky as if the wind had pressed it down over the years. A few mesquite trees leaned near the fence line, thorny and stubborn, like old sentries who had forgotten who they were guarding. Micah understood them. At 49, he still carried the build of the Navy SEAL he had once been. Broad shoulders, hard arms, a body made by discipline and then weathered by time. His face had deep lines around the eyes, not from smiling often, but from staring too long into distance and sun. His hair, dark brown with a few silver strands at the temples, had grown longer than regulation would have allowed. It brushed the back of his neck and lifted in the desert wind. A short beard shadowed his jaw, rough but kept under control, as if even his neglect had rules. On his right arm, beneath the sleeve of a plain military green t-shirt, the faded shape of a Navy SEAL tattoo showed when he moved. It was not bright anymore. Nothing about Micah was bright anymore. He had become a man of muted things, muted clothes, muted voice, muted laughter, muted grief. He did not sleep in the bed. The bed stood in the corner of the bedroom, made and untouched, a square island of ordinary life. To Micah, it was too high, too soft, too forgiving. A bed asked a man to surrender. The floor asked nothing. The floor was honest. The floor was close to the earth. So Micah slept there, on a thin blanket near the wall, flashlight within reach, boots angled toward the door. Some nights he slept for an hour, some nights less. On bad nights he opened his eyes before the coyotes started calling, before the pipes clicked in the cooling walls, before a distant truck rolled along the county road like thunder trapped inside metal. People in town called him reliable. They did not call him lonely. Reliable was easier for everyone. By day, Micah repaired water pumps for ranches scattered across the dry border country. He drove an old pickup with a toolbox bolted into the bed and a dent in the left fender that he never bothered to fix. His work took him down red dirt roads, past cattle tanks, wind-bent fences, and fields of hay that looked too tired to stand. In that part of Arizona, water was not a utility. Water was mercy with a motor. When a pump failed, goats bawled until their voices cracked. Cattle gathered near empty troughs and stared as if waiting for a miracle. Ranchers stood with their hats low and their hands on their hips, looking at the dead pump the way a man might look at a stopped heart. Micah was good with stopped things. He could listen to a motor and hear where it hurt. He could tell by the tremor in a pipe whether the pressure was wrong. He knew when a wire had burned, when a seal had failed, when sand had slipped into a system and started grinding the life out of it. Machines made sense. Machines did not pretend. If something was broken, there was a reason. If there was a reason, there might be a repair. A soul was not so generous. That was why he kept to pumps, pipes, fuses, pressure gauges, and the old pipe wrench with MS scratched into the handle. The wrench had weight. It fit his palm like an oath. He carried it everywhere, though half the time newer tools did the job better. Some men carried medals, some carried photographs. Micah carried a wrench because it belonged to the life he was trying to build instead of the life he could not forget. He avoided diners when they were crowded. If he had to eat in town, he took the booth in the back, facing the door. He paid in cash, spoke politely, and left before conversation could become a net. The waitresses knew his order: black coffee, eggs, toast. No small talk unless necessary. Once an old rancher told him, "You move like a man expecting the ceiling to fall." Micah had answered, "Depends on the ceiling." The rancher had laughed. Micah had not meant it as a joke. That night, the call came at 10:43. Micah was sitting on the floor near the kitchen wall, cleaning dust from a pressure switch he planned to reuse. The house smelled faintly of oil, old coffee, and sun-baked wood. His phone buzzed once on the counter. Lenora Pike. He knew the name before he answered. Lenora was a widow in her 70s who ran goats on a stubborn patch of land east of the old service road, not far from the boundary fence of Silver Spur Ranch. She was small, sharp-eyed, and tougher than most men who bragged about toughness. Her gray hair was usually braided down her back, and she carried a mesquite walking stick that had corrected more goats than age. "Micah," she said when he picked up, her voice dry as corn husk, "my main pump gave up." "Breaker?" "Checked it." "Pressure tank?" "Kicked it. Cussed at it. No resurrection." Despite himself, Micah almost smiled. "How many goats are we talking?" "Enough to start a choir of complaint by sunrise." He stood, already reaching for his boots. "I'll come out." "You don't have to tonight." "Yes, ma'am, I do." A pause softened the line. "Well," Lenora said, "I'll leave the yard light on, if that bulb hasn't also joined the rebellion." Micah hung up, pulled on his canvas jacket, and took his toolbox from the mudroom. Before leaving, he checked the doors once more. Front, back, kitchen window, bathroom window. Then he stopped at the threshold. For a moment, his hand stayed on the deadbolt. The house was empty behind him, but it did not feel empty in the harmless way a house should. It felt like something watching its own breath. He hated that about himself. Hated that a man could come home from war and still patrol a kitchen. Hated that a wooden door in Arizona could become, in the wrong hour, a gate in another country under another moon. He forced his hand away. "Pump," he muttered. "Just a pump." Outside, the desert night opened around him. The drive to Lenora's place took 30 minutes if the road was behaving, and 40 if the washboards were bad. That night, the road seemed determined to shake every bolt loose from his truck. Red dust rose behind him, pale in the moonlight. The sky spread overhead, black and brilliant, scattered with stars so sharp they looked hammered into place by some ancient desert god with a cruel sense of beauty. Micah drove with the window cracked. Warm wind pressed against his face. Creosote, dust, dry grass, and the faint mineral smell of old water lines drifted in. He passed 2 dark mailboxes, a leaning fence, and the turnoff toward Silver Spur Ranch. The sign there was barely visible in the dark, but he knew the shape of it. A metal spur welded above the name, black against a rusted post. Beyond it, land rolled toward low hills, private and quiet. Too quiet. Micah kept driving. Lenora's yard light flickered like a tired star above the pump shed. She was waiting on the porch in a faded yellow shirt, jeans, and boots, her mesquite stick in one hand. "Thought the road might swallow you," she called. "Tried. Didn't like the taste." That got him a laugh. Small, but real. The goats complained from the pen, their silhouettes shifting behind the fence like impatient little judges. Micah went straight to the pump shed. The motor housing was hot. The pressure gauge sat dead. He cut power, opened the panel, and began working by headlamp. For the next hour, the world narrowed to screws, wire, dust, and the smell of overheated insulation. Lenora stood nearby for a while, then went to quiet the goats. Micah preferred working without an audience. Machines told the truth more clearly when people stopped explaining them. He found the fault in a burned contact and a clogged intake line. Not good, but not fatal. He replaced what he could, cleaned what he could not, and coaxed the system back toward life. At last the motor coughed, shuddered, and caught. From the trough outside came the first rush of water. The goats erupted as if salvation had arrived wearing bells. Micah shut the panel and leaned back on his heels. Choir's warming up. Lenora nodded toward the pen. They'll be unbearable now. Success does that to goats. He packed his tools, but before he could close the box, he heard something. Not the pump, not a goat. A breath, small, uneven, held back as if the creature making it had learned that sound invited trouble. Micah froze. The night seemed to fold around that noise. He turned off his headlamp. Darkness deepened. The pump hummed behind him, steady now, but beneath it came another faint sound. A scrape. Metal, maybe? Then silence. Lenora noticed his stillness. "What is it?" Micah raised a hand. He listened the way he had listened in places where listening had meant staying alive. Wind dragged across loose tin near the shed. A goat knocked its horns against wood. Far away, a coyote cried. Then the breath again. Micah picked up his flashlight and moved toward the back of the property, past the pump shed, beyond a stack of cracked buckets and a dead tractor tire half buried in sand. Lenora followed several paces behind, her stick tapping once against stone before she stopped herself. The sound came from the strip of abandoned ground between Lenora's place and the secondary fence line of Silver Spur. Years ago, according to Lenora, it had been a shared maintenance path for water lines. Now it was a place where old things went to be forgotten. Warped boards, rusted wire, sun-blasted plastic drums, tires with no memory of roads. Micah swept the flashlight slowly. The beam passed over weeds, broken pallets, a coil of hose. Then two eyes caught the light. They did not shine with wildness. They shone with calculation. Micah lowered the beam at once, pointing it toward the ground instead of the face. Behind a pile of rotted boards sat a rusted metal cage, half hidden under a torn tarp. Inside it lay a dog, large frame, too thin, sable coat, black and tan, dulled by dust. Long legs folded under a body that should have been powerful but had been drained down to angles. One ear stood high, the left tipped slightly at the end, giving the dog a broken, watchful dignity. A German Shepherd mix. Working line, Micah guessed, though hunger had narrowed it almost beyond recognition. The dog did not bark. That unsettled him more than barking would have. It only watched. Its eyes were dark amber, old with a kind of exhaustion no animal should have to learn. There were marks on its body that told enough of a story without needing to be studied. Old scars, old hardship, old human failure. Micah did not let his gaze linger. The dog deserved more than to be examined like evidence. Lenora whispered behind him, "Lord have mercy." Micah crouched several feet from the cage. His knees gave a quiet pop. The dog stiffened. "Easy," Micah said, voice low. "Not coming at you." The dog's lips twitched, not quite a snarl. A warning, a plea, maybe both. Micah set the toolbox down slowly. Metal clicked against earth. The dog flinched so sharply that Micah felt the reaction in his own chest. There it was, not fear of death, fear of hands, fear of objects, fear of the next thing a person might decide to do. He knew that kind of waiting. Micah sat down in the dirt. Lenora did not speak. The desert did not speak either. Even the goats seemed to quiet, as if the whole ragged world had gathered around that cage and understood it had reached a sacred place, though not the kind with stained glass or hymns. This was a smaller altar, rust, dust, moonlight, and a starving dog who still had not surrendered its pride. Minutes passed. Micah talked softly, not because the words mattered, but because tone did. "Bad night to be alone out here," he said. "Then again, I've had worse accommodations." The dog stared. "Name's Micah, not that you asked." One ear shifted. "That old woman back there is Lenora. She'll pretend she doesn't like you, then feed you better than she feeds people." Lenora muttered, "I heard that." The dog's eyes flicked toward her, then back to Micah. That tiny movement felt like a door opening 1 inch. Micah took off his canvas jacket and placed it on the ground between them. The dog leaned back. He waited. Then he reached for the cage latch. Locked. Of course, not a good lock. Cheap, rusted, mean in the way neglected things could be mean. Micah took his cutters from the toolbox. He kept the movement slow, every gesture announced by breath. The cutters closed. The lock snapped with a dull sound. The dog recoiled, shoulder hitting the far side of the cage. Micah stopped. "Easy. That's the last ugly sound for a while." He opened the cage door and backed away. Nothing happened. The dog stayed inside, trembling without seeming to move. Its body had learned the geometry of confinement too well. Open space confused it. Micah's throat tightened. He had seen men do the same thing after coming home. Door open, sky above, still unable to step out. "You don't have to trust me," he said. "Just don't stay in there because somebody taught you that was all there is." The dog looked at him. Then slowly, painfully, it stretched one front paw toward the open door. Micah did not move. Another paw. The dog stepped out and nearly folded. Micah caught himself before reaching too fast. Instead, he slid his jacket closer. The dog sniffed it, hesitated, then allowed the cloth to touch its side. Lenora exhaled, a small broken sound. Micah wrapped the jacket loosely around the dog and lifted with careful strength. The animal tensed, but did not fight. It was lighter than it should have been. That angered him, but he put the anger somewhere safe for later. The dog needed calm, not a storm. At the truck, he laid it on the passenger seat. The dog kept its eyes open. Micah called Dr. Mara Voss before he even closed the door. Mara answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep but immediately alert once he explained. "Warm, not hot," she said. "Small water, no heavy food yet. I'll come at first light." "I'll document where I found him." "Good. And Micah?" "Yeah." "Don't let anyone talk you out of what you saw." After that, he sent a message to the county animal control office with the location, time, and photographs of the cage. He knew no one would come before morning. Out there, distance was its own kind of law. Lenora stood near the truck, arms wrapped around herself. "You taking him?" she asked. "For tonight." That's how it starts. Micah looked at the dog, wrapped in his jacket, amber eyes fixed on the windshield. He said nothing. On the drive home, the desert slid past in long black shapes. The dog lay still on the passenger seat, but not asleep. Never asleep. Every bump in the road tightened its body. Every distant light drew its stare. Micah understood. "You need a name," he said after a while. The dog did not blink. "Can't keep calling you Hey. Makes us both sound stupid." The road hummed under the tires. Micah thought of the way the dog had stayed silent in the cage, the way it watched the dark, the way it had stepped out only when it decided, not when commanded. "Rook," he said. The dog's ear shifted. In chess, the rook doesn't sneak around, doesn't pretend to be anything else. Moves straight. Holds the line. Protects the castle. He glanced over. The dog was still watching him. "Yeah?" Micah said softly. Rook. When they reached the house, Micah did not take Rook inside the living room. Too many walls, too much human smell, too much too soon. Instead, he prepared the cool shed behind the house with an old army blanket, a bowl of water, and a small amount of soft food Mara had once told him to keep for emergencies. Rook stepped down from the truck slowly. For a moment, under the porch light, Micah saw what the dog might become if life gave it back what had been taken. Tall, noble, black and gold beneath the dust, a creature made not for cruelty, but for loyalty. Inside the shed, Rook ignored the blanket at the back. He chose the threshold. He lowered himself near the open doorway, nose pointed toward the yard, body between Micah's house and the desert. Micah stood there, one hand on the doorframe. Then he gave a quiet laugh, rusty from disuse. "Great," he said. "Now there are two of us who don't know how to sleep." Rook's amber eyes lifted to him. For the first time that night, the dog's breathing eased. Micah left the shed door half open and went back toward the house. He checked the front door, the back door, the kitchen window, the bathroom window. Then he looked through the glass toward the shed. Rook was still at the threshold, watching the dark. Micah stood there longer than he meant to. Far out beyond the fence, on the dirt road that led toward Silver Spur, a white truck passed through the night. No clear logo, no auxiliary lights. Just a pale shape moving where pale shapes should not need to move. It slowed near the old turnoff. Then it rolled on and vanished into the desert like a scorpion slipping under sand. Rook rose inside the shed. Micah saw it, and the quiet at last stopped pretending to be empty. By morning, the desert had washed itself in gold. The terrible things of night often looked smaller after sunrise in Arizona. The rusted fences became fences again. The shadows under trucks became ordinary shade. The long road toward Silver Spur lay quiet beneath the heat, pretending it had never carried anything secret. Micah Sandoval knew better. He had slept less than an hour. Not because Rook had made noise. The dog had hardly made a sound. That was the part that kept Micah awake. A healthy dog shifted, sighed, scratched, dreamed, complained at birds. Rook stayed at the threshold of the shed like a carved guardian, his black and gold body folded carefully on the concrete, amber eyes following every movement in the yard. Micah had checked on him at midnight, then at 2, then at 4. Each time, Rook lifted his head before Micah reached the door. "You and me," Micah murmured once, "we're going to make each other worse before we make each other better." Rook blinked slowly, as if considering the diagnosis. At 6:12, a dusty white van came rolling up the drive, its sides marked with faded blue letters. Mara Voss, DVM, Mobile Veterinary Care. The van looked like it had crossed half the state and argued with every mile. Red dirt coated the tires. A crack ran across the lower corner of the windshield. A small plastic saint sat on the dashboard beside a roll of medical tape and a half-empty coffee. Dr. Mara Voss stepped out carrying a hard black medical case. She was in her mid-40s, with dark hair tied low at the back of her neck and a face that did not waste expressions. The Arizona sun had put fine lines around her eyes, but there was nothing tired about the eyes themselves. They were gray-green, sharp and steady, the kind of eyes that could find a fever in the tilt of an ear or a lie in a man's paperwork. She wore a chambray shirt under an olive utility vest, dark cargo pants, and boots that had seen enough ranch mud to stop caring about dignity. A stethoscope hung from one pocket. A red medical notebook was tucked beneath her arm. Micah met her halfway down the drive. "Coffee?" he asked. "Later." "That means bad?" "That means dog first." He nodded and led her to the shed. Rook had risen by the time they reached the door. His paws were planted wide, his body angled between the humans and the shadowed back wall. His left ear tipped at the end, giving him a lopsided, wary nobility. In daylight, his condition showed more clearly. Too much rib, too little muscle over the hips. Fur dulled by dust and neglect. The faint, uneven ring around his neck, where hair had grown back poorly. Mara stopped several feet away. She did not crouch immediately. She did not coo. She did not do any of the things people did when they wanted to make themselves feel kind. Instead, she let Rook look at her. "Well," she said quietly, "you're a serious one." Rook stared. Micah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "He came with opinions." "Most survivors do." That word hung there a moment. Survivor. Micah looked at Rook and felt something shift in his chest, small as sand moving under a boot. Until Mara said it, some part of him had still been thinking of the dog as a found thing, a responsibility, a problem left at the edge of another man's fence. A survivor was different. A survivor had come through something and still stood in the doorway. Mara opened her case slowly, talking under her breath as she laid out what she needed. Thermometer, scanner, sterile wipes, small light, gloves. She let each object make as little sound as possible, but even the soft click of plastic made Rook tense. Micah saw it. So did Mara. "Metal sounds?" she asked. "Tools, locks, maybe truck doors. He flinches before he thinks." "Then we give him time to think." She sat on an overturned feed bucket instead of stepping closer. For several minutes, she simply asked Micah questions. Where exactly had he found the dog? Was the cage on Lenora's land? Was there water nearby? Had there been food? Was the lock intact? Had he taken photographs before moving him? Micah answered everything. He gave her the time, the location, the strip of old maintenance ground between Lenora Pike's property and the secondary fence near Silver Spur. He showed the photos on his phone, the cage half hidden beneath a torn tarp, the rusted lock, the old boards, the useless bowl turned on its side. Mara's mouth tightened once. Only once. She wrote in the red notebook. "Good," she said. "You documented before transport. That matters." "I messaged County Animal Control." "I saw. They forwarded me the notice at dawn." Her voice was dry. "Very heroic of them, forwarding an email." Micah almost smiled. "Busy office." "Understaffed office," Mara corrected. "There's a difference. One is an excuse. The other is a warning." Rook shifted one paw forward. Mara noticed, but did not look directly at him. She kept her gaze lowered, her body turned slightly sideways. Non-threatening, patient, exact. Finally, Rook came close enough to sniff the edge of her boot. "Hello, handsome," she said, so softly it was barely sound. The dog allowed her to touch his shoulder. Micah watched her hands. Mara's hands were nothing like her eyes. Her eyes cut. Her hands listened. She moved through the exam the way Micah moved through a pump system, with respect for what had failed and what might still hold. She checked Rook's gums, hydration, temperature, joints, paws. When she reached the neck, Rook's body went rigid. Micah took one step forward. Mara lifted two fingers without looking at him. Wait. So he waited. Rook trembled. His lips drew back slightly, not in threat so much as in memory. Mara froze in place, hand resting still against his fur, letting him discover that nothing followed. No yank, no command, no punishment. At last Rook breathed. Mara continued. Around the neck, beneath the uneven fur, she found what she had already suspected. A disturbed patch, not fresh, but wrong. She took out a scanner and passed it over Rook's shoulders, then along his neck, then lower. The scanner stayed silent. "No readable chip," she said. Micah's jaw tightened. "Could be he never had one." "Could be." "But you don't think so?" Mara looked at him then. Working line shepherd mix, trained posture, conditioned reactions, signs of long-term restraint, and a neck patch where identification may have been tampered with? I think somebody wanted this dog to be hard to trace. The shed seemed to grow smaller. Outside, a mourning dove called from the fence, soft and foolishly peaceful. Micah looked at Rook. The dog had lowered his head, but his eyes were still open, still taking in every corner, every hand, every object. Micah knew that kind of alertness. It was not strength, no matter what people liked to call it. It was a debt the body kept collecting. "What now?" he asked. "Now we do this clean." Mara closed the scanner and reached for her notebook. "I document his condition. You keep copies of every photograph. You write down exactly where he was found and why you had legal access to that area. You do not embellish. You do not guess. Facts only. I'm not trying to own him if he belongs somewhere." Mara's gaze softened by 1 degree. "Micah, a dog can have an owner on paper and still not have a home." That sentence landed harder than it should have. Rook had moved closer to the doorway again. He stood with morning light along his back, black saddle dusty, tan legs too thin, left ear tipped like a torn flag that refused to come down. For one brief second, Micah saw not the cage, not the legal trouble, not the road toward Silver Spur. He saw the dog as he might have been, strong, sure-footed, made to walk beside someone who deserved him. Then the moment passed. Mara gave Rook a careful injection for dehydration support and laid out a simple feeding plan. Small amounts. Soft food. Quiet space. No sudden visitors. No collar yet. No reaching over his head. "No crowding him," she said. Micah looked at his empty yard. "That one I can manage." She glanced at the house. "You sleep at all?" "I own a bed." "That is not what I asked." "No." Mara shut her case. "Try." "Is that medical advice?" "For both of you." By late morning, Micah had printed the photos at the small office supply store in town, made copies of Mara's preliminary report, and marked the location on an old county map. He did not like paperwork. Paper made things look cleaner than they were. A clean page could hold a dirty lie and never show a stain. Still, he did it. He filed the animal control update. He wrote a statement. He attached Lenora's name as the property owner who had called him for pump repair. He kept the originals in a folder on the kitchen table, weighed down by the old pipe wrench marked MS Rook, watched all of it from the open mudroom door. He had not entered the house, not fully. He would put his front paws over the threshold, sniff the air, then retreat to the shaded concrete as if rooms were traps pretending to be shelter. Micah understood that too. At 3:37 in the afternoon, a black pickup and a tan SUV rolled through the heat shimmer and stopped outside Micah's front gate. Rook stood before the vehicles had fully stopped. No bark, no rush, just a sudden tightening of the world. Micah saw it from the kitchen window. The fur along Rook's shoulders lifted, his head lowered. His body went still in a way that was far more serious than noise. Two men stepped out. The first was built like a gatepost and seemed just as interested in being moved. He was in his early 50s, heavy through the chest and gut, with sun-reddened skin, a square jaw, and a gray-brown mustache that gave his mouth a permanent look of contempt. He wore a cream western shirt, dark jeans, square-toed boots, and a belt buckle large enough to signal authority from a distance. A silver ring flashed on one thick hand. Calder Vane. Micah had seen him around town, though never close. Owner of Silver Spur Ranch, a man people described with lowered voices and shrugs, not loved, not crossed either. The second man looked as if dust had no right to touch him. Tall, lean, late 30s, sand-colored chinos, pale blue shirt, boots too clean for ranch work, dark folder under one arm, sunglasses expensive enough to make the desert look like it had signed a contract. Reed Hask, though Micah did not know the name yet. Micah stepped onto the porch but did not open the gate. Rook moved behind the screen door. Calder's eyes went first to Micah, then to the house, then the cameras under the eaves, then the truck in the drive. He took inventory like a man measuring another man's walls. "You Sandoval?" Calder asked. Micah rested one hand on the porch rail. "Depends who's asking." The clean man smiled. "Reed Hask," he said, lifting the folder slightly. "Operations manager for Silver Spur. This is Mr. Vane." Calder did not nod. Micah waited. Reed continued, voice smooth as water poured over glass. "We understand you recovered a dog last night near a disputed maintenance strip adjoining Silver Spur property." "Recovered is one word." "A fortunate one," Reed said. "We're glad the animal is safe." Calder's ring clicked once against the metal gate. Rook heard it. The sound was small, dry, almost nothing. The dog's body changed. Micah saw the shift before the growl came. Rook did not explode. He did not throw himself at the screen. He simply advanced one step, head low, amber eyes fixed on Calder's hand. A sound rose from him then. Low, buried, like thunder under the ground. Calder's gaze snapped toward the door. For the first time since arriving, the big man's face showed something other than control. Not fear exactly. Recognition. It vanished quickly. "Well," Calder said. "There he is." Micah's hand tightened on the rail. Reed opened the folder. "There may be some confusion regarding ownership. Silver Spur has working relationships with several regional breeding and training facilities. One of them, Crown Mesa Working Dogs, has reported a shepherd-type animal missing from an associated holding area." "Holding area," Micah repeated. Reed's smile did not change. "A legal term?" "Funny. It sounds like a cage if you say it in plain English." Calder stepped closer to the gate. "Man who fixes pumps ought to be careful with plain English." Micah looked at him. "And men who lose dogs ought to be careful with locks." The air sharpened. Reed slid between the silence before Calder could fill it with something heavier. "No one is accusing anyone of bad intent," he said, "but the dog was found close to private land. The old maintenance access has been under dispute for years. We'd all be better served by following proper procedure." "I already filed with Animal Control." "Yes, we saw." Reed tapped the folder with a blue pen. "That's why we're here early, to avoid unnecessary complications." Rook growled again, deeper this time. Micah did not turn around. He did not need to. He could feel the dog behind him, not as a weapon, not as backup, but as a truth the men at the gate had not expected to speak. Calder looked past Micah toward the screen. "Dog looks nervous," he said. Micah's voice stayed flat. "Some men have that effect." Reed's eyes cooled slightly. "Mr. Sandoval, we are prepared to provide documentation that the animal may be registered through Crown Mesa. If that is confirmed, temporary transfer may be required." "Temporary transfer to who?" "The appropriate party." "No." The word came out before Micah weighed it. Too fast, too personal. He knew it. Reed knew it. Calder smiled as if he had just found the soft board in a fence. Mara's warning came back to Micah. "Do this clean." He breathed once through his nose. "What I mean," Micah said, slower, "is that no animal leaves this property without county instruction, veterinary review, and a documented chain of custody. If you have papers, send them to Animal Control and Dr. Mara Voss." Reed studied him. "You're very thorough for a pump repairman." Micah said nothing. Calder leaned both hands on the gate. The silver ring glinted. "Listen to me, Sandoval. Out here, people mind their wells, their fences, and their own business. Desert doesn't care for curiosity." Behind the screen, Rook went silent. That silence disturbed Micah more than the growl. The dog was staring at Calder's right hand, at the ring, at the way it rested against the gate. Micah saw the faint tremor in Rook's front legs, saw the effort it took for him not to retreat. Whatever world Calder carried on his boots, Rook knew the smell of it. Micah stepped down from the porch and walked to the gate. He stopped close enough to make Calder straighten. "I fix pumps," Micah said. "That means I know when pressure builds where it shouldn't." For a moment, no one moved. Then Reed closed his folder. "We'll be in touch through official channels." "Do that." Calder's eyes stayed on Micah a moment longer. Then he turned toward his truck. Before getting in, he looked once more at the screen door. Rook did not move. The vehicles backed out in a slow curl of dust and rolled down the drive toward the county road. Only when they were gone did Micah turn. Rook stood behind the screen, trembling. Micah opened the door but did not reach for him. Rook stepped out, crossed the porch, and pressed his shoulder lightly against Micah's leg. It was not affection, not exactly. It was contact, proof, a line tied between two living things. Micah looked down. "You knew him?" Rook's left ear twitched. "Or you knew something close enough." The dog leaned harder for one breath, then pulled away. That was enough. After sunset, Micah sat at the kitchen table with the folder, the photographs, Mara's report, and the old county map spread before him. Rook lay just outside the mudroom door, where he could see both Micah and the yard. The house smelled of paper, coffee, dog, and dust. Micah turned on the security monitor. The footage from the previous night flickered in grainy black and white. Yard empty, shed dark. Mesquite shadows crawling in the wind. Then at 2:13 a.m., headlights appeared beyond the fence. A white truck moved along the dirt road toward the old turnoff. Micah leaned closer. The truck was not marked clearly. No company name on the side, at least not from that angle. A boxy service body. Tubes or pipe length strapped along one side. A tarp over something in the bed. It looked like any one of a dozen agricultural service vehicles that wandered the border country fixing wells, hauling feed, delivering parts, or pretending to do those things. The truck slowed near the turnoff to the dry wash. Stopped, not long, long enough. Then it continued toward Silver Spur's outer road and disappeared from frame. Behind Micah, Rook rose. The dog was not looking at the monitor. He was looking at the window. His body had gone rigid again, as if memory had walked into the yard without making a sound. Micah replayed the clip. The truck appeared, slowed, stopped, moved on. Again. Again. On the fourth replay, he noticed the shape hanging from the rear bumper, a small dark plate or charm swinging once as the truck turned. The image blurred before he could identify it. Micah shut off the monitor and opened his work notebook. It was not a detective's notebook. It had pump sizes, tank pressures, ranch names, parts ordered, unpaid invoices, and reminders written in his square, compact handwriting. A normal book? A repairman's book. He turned back through the past 3 months. White service truck near Weller Place, no logo, late, tan utility van at Pike Turnoff, claimed wrong address. Box truck with feed decals near Old Wash. 11:40 p.m. Silver Spur outer road closed. Maintenance? Crown Mesa? He stopped. The name was not written in the notebook, not exactly. But 2 months earlier, under a repair call for a ranch east of the dry wash, Micah had scribbled, "Mesa crew there before me. Blue pen guy, clean boots." He stared at the words. Blue pen guy, clean boots. Outside, Rook stood at the mudroom threshold, facing the dark. Micah picked up his pencil. What had once been background noise, trucks, roads, false errands, men with polite voices, began to gather into lines. Not proof, not yet, but a map. And Micah Sandoval, who had spent years trying not to see danger in every shadow, found himself facing the cruel opposite problem. This time the shadow might be real. Rook learned the yard before he learned the house. He learned the mesquite tree first. Every morning, when the sun came up hard and white over the Arizona borderland, Rook limped out of the shed and settled beneath the mesquite's crooked shade. The tree was not generous. It gave shade the way an old soldier gave compliments, rarely and in narrow strips. Still, Rook chose it. From there he could see the house, the truck, the fence line, the pump shed, and the long dirt road where the world arrived before it was invited. Micah noticed that. He noticed everything about the dog, though he tried not to make it obvious. Rook still did not like quick hands. If Micah reached too fast for a wrench near him, the shepherd's body tightened before thought could catch up. If a socket slipped from the workbench and struck the concrete with a bright metallic clatter, Rook flinched so hard his claws scraped the ground. But he did not run as far now. The first day he had retreated all the way behind the shed. The third day, only to the door. By the fifth, he stepped back, trembled, watched Micah pick up the fallen tool, and then returned to the mesquite, as if dignity required him to pretend none of it had happened. Micah respected that. Good policy, he told him. Panic privately. Look official in public. Rook, who had no use for jokes, stared at him with solemn amber eyes. Micah laughed anyway. It surprised him, the sound. Not because it was loud. It was not. It came out rough, half-buried, like water hitting a pipe that had been dry too long. But it was real. For a moment, it widened the small space around him. Rook tilted his head. "Don't get excited," Micah said. "That was probably a mechanical failure." The dog's left ear, tipped at the end, twitched in the hot wind. The days settled into a cautious rhythm. Micah followed the feeding plan Dr. Mara Voss had written in her red notebook. Small meals, clean water, quiet space, no sudden collar, no reaching over the head. Rook accepted food only after Micah stepped away. Then, little by little, he began eating while Micah remained nearby. Trust did not arrive like thunder. It came like groundwater. Slow, hidden, moving through stone long before anything green appeared on the surface. Micah repaired the back fence one morning after a javelina had bullied its way through the lower wire. He knelt in the dirt, military green t-shirt darkened with sweat, old pipe wrench beside him, sleeves tight over the muscle in his arms. Rook lay under the mesquite, watching every twist of wire as if fence repair were a sacred ceremony. "You supervising?" Micah asked. Rook blinked. "Good. I hate working under management." The dog rose and came closer, stopping just beyond reach. His ribs did not show as sharply now, though he was still too thin. In sunlight, his coat began to reveal itself beneath the dust. Gold in the legs and chest, black across the back, a dark mask around the muzzle that made his amber eyes look brighter. He was not a pretty dog in the polished way of calendar dogs. He looked like a banner pulled from a battlefield, torn at one edge, still carrying its colors. Micah tightened the wire and stood. Rook stepped toward the fence, sniffed the repair, then looked at him. Micah nodded gravely. "Inspection passed?" Rook sneezed. Harsh, but fair? The next day, when Micah checked the small pump behind his house, Rook followed. The pump was not broken. Micah simply liked knowing what still worked. He opened the housing, leaned over the motor, and listened. Rook stood beside him, rigid with importance. "If you could hold a wrench," Micah said, "I'd make you my partner." The dog looked at the pipe wrench on the ground, then back at Micah. "No, not with your mouth. Mara would kill me." There it was again, that narrow crack of laughter. It did not heal him. Micah knew better than to believe in miracles that cheap. But it did something almost as dangerous. It made the house feel less like a bunker. Work continued calling him out. A pump east of Sonoita, a pressure tank near a goat dairy, a cracked line at a hayfield that had no business still trying to be green. Micah left Rook in the shed at first, with water, food, shade, and the yard camera watching over him. Each time Micah returned, Rook was at the threshold, standing as if he had been holding the horizon in place by will alone. By the end of the week, Rook began riding along on shorter jobs. Not in the front seat yet. That space still made him stiff and watchful. Micah laid an old army blanket across the back of the extended cab, and Rook settled there, head low, ears tracking every sound. The border country moved past the windows in burnt colors: red earth, yellow grass, black cattle, white water tanks shining like bones. Service trucks came and went. Some carried feed, some carried pipe, some carried men who lifted one hand in greeting and kept their eyes on the road. Micah had spent years ignoring most of them, not out of carelessness, out of survival. A man like him could not afford to treat every shadow as a threat, even if his body wanted to. So he had built rules. A truck on a ranch road was normal. A van near a water tank was normal. Men with tarps, pipes, muddy boots, and bad invoices were normal. Border work was messy, underfunded, improvised. Half the county ran on duct tape and stubbornness. But now, with Rook in the truck, normal began to change shape. At the Pike turnoff, Rook lifted his head before a white utility van appeared from a side road. Near the dry wash, his breathing tightened when they passed a box truck with feed decals too clean for its rusted wheels. At an empty stretch where the road bent toward Silver Spur's outer boundary, he stood in the back seat, trembling, nose pressed to the window, though nothing visible moved except heat. Micah started marking things down. He did not call it investigating. Elena Cross had not yet entered his life, and he had no interest in playing lawman. He wrote because he was a repairman, and repairmen respected patterns. Pumps failed for reasons. Pressure dropped for reasons. A motor burning out in July was unfortunate. 3 motors burning out along the same line was a message. His work notebook filled with small additions in the margins. White service truck, no clear logo, late afternoon. Feed decals, wrong county plate. Tan van, turned around before Weller Place. Rook alert, near wash. He told himself it was probably nothing. His pencil kept moving anyway. The call from Tobin Weller came 2 days later. Tobin owned a hay property west of the dry wash, though owned seemed too proud a word for the relationship. The land looked like it was slowly eating him. Every year, drought took another bite. Every year, the bank took another. Tobin was 67, thin as a fence rail, with sunken cheeks, pale eyes, and hands cracked from work that no longer paid enough to justify itself. When Micah arrived, Tobin was standing near the pump house in a faded flannel shirt and suspenders, twisting a feed cap in both hands. The pump needed a new pressure switch. Simple job. The silence around Tobin was not simple. Rook stayed close to Micah's truck, watching the old man without aggression. Tobin noticed the dog, then looked away too quickly. "New shepherd?" he asked. "Found him?" "Strays come through." "Not like this one." Tobin said nothing. Micah opened the pump panel. Dust poured from the housing. "You seen service trucks out by the wash lately?" Tobin's hands tightened around the feed cap. "Service trucks are how things keep running." That wasn't an answer. "No," Tobin said. "Guess it wasn't." Micah waited. The desert had taught him that silence could be a tool if a man did not swing it too hard. Tobin looked toward the far ridge, where Silver Spur's land began beyond a wavering curtain of heat. His pale eyes narrowed as if the horizon itself had leaned closer. "There are folks," he said at last, voice low, "who rent storage that ain't for anything growing out of the ground." Micah kept his posture unchanged. "Storage. Sheds, old barns, shade structures, places nobody looks twice at." "Who?" Tobin swallowed. Rook stepped forward then, slow and quiet. Tobin saw him coming and went still. The old man's face changed in a way Micah did not expect. Not fear of being bitten. Something more ashamed than fear. He looked at Rook as if the dog had carried a question across miles of sand and placed it at his feet. Rook stopped several paces away, his amber eyes fixed on Tobin. The old rancher's mouth trembled once. "I don't want trouble," Tobin whispered. Micah softened his voice. "Nobody does." "That's how trouble gets rich." The words seemed to surprise Tobin himself. A gust moved through the dead hay. It rattled the stems together, dry and brittle, like bones in a pouch. Micah let the moment stand. He did not push further. Not yet. Men like Tobin did not open because of stranger pride. They opened when the weight inside grew heavier than the fear outside. Micah finished the repair. When the pump kicked on, water surged through the line with a deep, living thump. Tobin listened to it with a grief that made Micah look away. At the truck, Tobin approached slowly. "That dog," he said. Micah turned. Tobin stared at Rook. "He don't bark much." "No?" "Sometimes that means they learned barking don't help." Micah did not answer. Tobin put the feed cap back in his pocket and walked away. On the drive home, Rook kept his head up the entire time. That night, the white truck returned. Micah was at the kitchen table, sorting invoices he had no desire to sort, when Rook rose from the mudroom threshold. The movement was so sudden that Micah looked up before he heard anything. Rook's ears were forward, his body lowered, not toward the yard this time, but toward Micah. Then the sound came. A low engine beyond the fence. Headlights swept across the far wall, thin and pale through the blinds. Rook gave one sharp bark, the first real bark Micah had heard from him, and lunged toward the front door. "Easy," Micah said, already standing. But Rook did not go to the door to get out. He went to block it. Micah stepped forward. Rook grabbed the hem of his t-shirt gently, but with desperate force, and pulled backward. "Rook!" The dog pulled again, paws skidding on the floor. The headlights moved over the window. For one blinding second, the kitchen disappeared. Micah was not in Arizona. He was somewhere else, years before, heat trapped under armor, dust in his teeth, headlights approaching a checkpoint too slowly and too fast at the same time. Voices overlapped in a language of command and warning. A radio crackled. Someone shouted his name. Someone else laughed once, strangely, as if the world had made an obscene joke. The present narrowed. His hand went to the edge of the table. He could not get air low enough into his chest. The engine outside rolled past, but inside him it kept coming. Micah dropped to one knee, then to the floor. Not dramatically, not like defeat in a story. Like a building whose supports had held too long and finally admitted gravity. Rook released the shirt at once. The dog was shaking. His entire body trembled, from shoulders to paws, but he did not run to the shed. He did not hide beneath the table. He pressed himself between Micah and the door, standing over him with his head low and his ribs moving fast. Micah heard the growl start in Rook's chest, not loud, not aimed at him. A boundary, a wounded guardian drawing a line. Micah closed his eyes and placed one palm flat on the floor. Floor, house, Arizona. He forced himself to count what was real. Tile under hand, coffee on table, dog breathing, engine fading, no radio, no shouted orders, no smoke, just a kitchen, a door, and a German Shepherd mix trembling so hard he could barely stand, yet choosing to stand anyway. Something in Micah broke open then, but not in the old way. He lifted his hand slowly and rested it against Rook's shoulder. The dog flinched once, then stayed. "You're scared too," Micah whispered. Rook's growl faded into a rough exhale. "And you still got between me and the door." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Outside, the truck was gone. Inside, the house seemed to return piece by piece. Micah did not get up right away. He sat on the floor with his back against the cabinet, one hand resting lightly on Rook's shoulder, feeling the dog's tremors quiet, little by little. The old shame tried to rise in him, the shame of a man built for control losing control in his own kitchen. But Rook did not look at him with pity. Rook did not ask what was wrong. Rook only stayed. Maybe that was what mercy looked like when it had 4 paws and 1 tipped ear. The next morning, Micah called Mara. She listened without interrupting. That was one of her gifts. When he finished, she said, "I know someone you should talk to." "I'm not joining a support group." "I was going to suggest federal animal protection, but thank you for making it weird." Micah rubbed his eyes. "Sorry." "Her name is Elena Cross. She has been tracking reports in this region for months. Missing dogs, questionable breeding records, night transports, ranch storage leases that don't make sense." Micah looked through the kitchen window. Rook was under the mesquite, watching the dirt road. "Mara," he said, "why didn't you tell me that before?" "Because suspicion without a bridge is just noise. You may have brought me the bridge." Elena Cross arrived at noon in a dark blue SUV with no ranch dust on the tires, but plenty of miles in the engine. She was 46, compact and straight-backed, with black hair cut near her jaw and eyes that missed little. She wore a charcoal field shirt, dark pants, and a light federal jacket folded over one arm rather than displayed like a flag. She did not greet Micah like a fan of old military stories. "Good." She shook his hand once, firm and brief, then looked past him at Rook. "That him?" "That's Rook." "Does he tolerate strangers?" "He tolerates honest distance." Elena nodded, as if that was the clearest answer she had received all week. They sat at Micah's kitchen table. He gave her copies of Mara's report, the photographs, his camera footage, and his work notebook. He expected skepticism. He respected skepticism. Elena gave him something better. Precision. She did not gasp at the cage photos. She did not make promises. She asked dates, times, routes, service markings, property names. She circled locations on the map. Her questions cut away drama until only structure remained. "I've had reports," she said, tapping the map with a silver recorder. "But they've been scattered. A missing shepherd here, a false breeding transfer there, a rancher complaining anonymously about storage he regretted leasing. None of it held together. And now? Now I have a repairman who drives the same back roads as the trucks and a dog who reacts to places before your cameras do." Micah frowned. "He's not evidence." "No," Elena said. "He's a witness who can't testify. That means we use what he gives us carefully and prove the rest another way." Micah looked at her then. For the first time, he liked her. Not warmly. Warmth took him a while, but he recognized a person who understood the weight of saying something exactly right. Elena closed the notebook. "You do not follow trucks. You do not approach Silver Spur. You do not try to solve this with old training and bad sleep. You help me with facts, not heroics." Micah's mouth tightened. Rook, lying by the mudroom, lifted his head. Elena followed the movement. "He needs you alive and boring." Micah looked at the dog. "Boring," he said. "That hurts." Rook sneezed. Elena almost smiled. That evening, after Elena left, Micah walked the fence line with Rook. He told himself it was only to check a loose post near the wash road. That was half true. The other half was that Rook had been restless since sunset, pacing from the mudroom to the yard, then back again, as if the land itself had begun whispering through his paws. They reached the old junction where the dirt track bent toward Silver Spur's outer fence. Rook stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. His body went rigid in the low orange light. The sun was sinking behind the ridge, turning the desert red gold, the color of old copper, and warning. Micah took one step toward the road. Rook moved in front of him. "Rook!" The dog did not look back. Micah tried to step around. Rook blocked him again, quiet, trembling, absolute. No bark, no growl, just refusal. Micah followed the line of the dog's stare. Near the fence stood a rusted metal post, half hidden by tumbleweed and brittle grass. It might once have held a maintenance sign. Now only a torn rectangle of metal remained, its surface eaten by sun and time. But beneath the rust, something had been painted in black. Faded? Almost gone? A chess rook? Micah stood very still. The dog he had named in a tired truck on a dark road stared at the mark as if it had called him by a name older than rescue. Wind moved across the dirt road. The sign creaked once. Micah looked from the black symbol to Rook, then toward the track leading deeper into the desert. He did not step onto it, not yet. Behind them, the evening gathered itself into shadow. And for the first time since Rook had come to his door, Micah wondered whether he had chosen the dog's name at all. Elena Cross did not build cases out of anger. Anger was useful for getting out of bed. It was useful for making phone calls that nobody wanted to answer. It was useful for sitting across from men who smiled too easily and asking one more question after they thought the meeting was finished. But anger could not hold a warrant together. Paper could. So Elena spread the paper across Micah Sandoval's kitchen table like a map of a kingdom that had learned to hide its monsters behind signatures. There were printed photographs from Micah's security camera. There were timestamps from service roads. There were copies of Dr. Mara Voss's medical notes on Rook. There were county property maps showing old maintenance access strips, dry wash crossings, storage barns, and boundary fences. There were Micah's work records, the ones he had written for pumps and pressure tanks, now carrying a second life in their margins. White service truck, no logo, feed decals, wrong county plate. Mesa crew there before me. Blue pen guy, clean boots. Elena read that line twice. Across the table, Micah watched her in silence. Rook lay near the mudroom threshold, close enough to see them both, far enough to retreat if a chair scraped too sharply. The shepherd's ribs had begun to disappear under new weight, but his eyes still carried the sleepless shine of a creature who trusted sleep about as much as Micah did. Mara stood at the counter, drinking coffee as if it had offended her and she meant to defeat it. She had come with an updated report and left her red medical notebook open beside the sink. Elena tapped the map with one finger. "Silver Spur is not the whole thing," she said. Micah did not answer. He had expected that. Men like Calder Vane were rarely the whole thing. They were gates, they were not the road. Elena circled 3 points with a pencil. For months we have had scattered reports. A dog listed as transferred but never arriving. A breeding facility registered under one name, operating under another. Ranchers renting storage to companies that exist mostly on invoices. Service trucks moving at hours when nobody sane is repairing irrigation. People repair irrigation at strange hours, Micah said. Mara glanced at him. You repair irrigation at strange hours. Exactly. Nobody sane. Elena did not smile, but something in her face acknowledged the joke and moved on. That is why it was hard to separate real work from cover. Out here, everything looks improvised. A truck with pipes on the side does not raise suspicion. A barn leased for agricultural supplies does not raise suspicion. A dog transport marked as a working dog transfer does not raise suspicion if the paperwork looks clean. Micah looked at the documents. Clean. He had never liked that word when people used it about paper. A clean sheet could carry a dirty lie without leaving a stain. A clean signature could move a living creature from one cage to another and call it inventory. "What is Crown Mesa?" he asked. Elena pulled out a file. Crown Mesa Working Dogs, registered as a breeding and training outfit. On paper, they provide guard dogs, ranch dogs, private security dogs, and specialized working dogs. On paper. On paper, Elena repeated. Their filings are inconsistent. Their listed property does not match transport volume. They have too many transfers and too few veterinary confirmations. Names appear, disappear, and reappear under related businesses. Mara crossed her arms. A shell game with kennels. That is one way to say it, Elena said. Micah's gaze shifted toward Rook. The dog was not asleep. His head rested on his paws, but his amber eyes were open, fixed not on Elena, not on Mara, but on the folder with Crown Mesa's name printed at the top. The name meant nothing to him, or maybe names never meant much to dogs. Maybe they knew the world by smell, by tone, by pressure in a hand, by the shape of fear in a room. Elena continued, I am not saying every animal connected to them is handled illegally. That would be hard to prove right now. What I am saying is that Crown Mesa appears to provide legitimacy to animals moving through places like Silver Spur. Legitimacy, Micah said. Certificates, transfer papers, storage agreements, transport logs, words that make everyone downstream feel safe enough not to look too hard. Outside, wind moved along the fence. The mesquite branches scratched softly against each other like an old man rubbing his hands before telling a secret. Mara closed the red notebook. And Rook? Elena looked at the dog. He complicates them. Rook lifted his head. Micah felt his own shoulders tighten. Because his chip will not read? Micah asked. Because his chip will not read, because he was found near Silver Spur, because Mara documented his condition before anyone could rewrite the story, and because your photos show the cage outside a clearly identified maintenance strip. Then we are ahead. For now, Elena said. But men who use clean paper tend to answer with cleaner paper. By afternoon, the heat had turned the desert white. Micah drove to Tobin Weller's place with Rook in the back of the cab. He had not planned to bring the dog, but Rook had refused to stay behind. Refused was the only word for it. Not by barking. Not by making a scene. He simply stood beside the truck door and looked at Micah with the grave patience of a judge waiting for the guilty to confess. You're getting pushy, Micah told him. Rook placed one paw on the running board. Micah sighed. Fine, but if Mara asks, this was your idea. The Weller property looked worse in full sun. Hay fields stretched out in tired strips, more gray than green. A windmill stood still near an empty trough. The house had once been white, but dust and years had softened it into the color of old bone. Tobin Weller was repairing a gate latch when Micah pulled up. The old man looked thinner than he had 2 days before, as if every conversation had cost him weight. He wore the same faded flannel, sleeves rolled to his elbows, suspenders hanging slightly loose over narrow shoulders. In his shirt pocket, a small plastic pill case pressed against the fabric. His wife's medicine, Micah remembered. Tobin saw Rook step from the truck and went still. The shepherd did not approach quickly. He stood beside Micah, head level, left ear tipped, eyes steady. There was no accusation in him. That was almost worse. Pump holding? Micah asked. Tobin wiped his hands on a rag. Holding? That is not why I am here. No, Tobin said. Reckon it isn't. They stood near the gate while wind combed through dead hay. Micah did not bring up Elena first. He did not bring up Silver Spur first. He let the old man decide whether courage would arrive wearing words. Tobin stared at Rook. I heard dogs one night, he said. Micah waited. Not a lot, not like a kennel. Just enough to make a man stop pretending the wind was doing it. Tobin's voice roughened. Reed Hask came around last winter, said Silver Spur had clients needing overflow storage, equipment, feed, temporary use. Legal contract, clean as church shoes. Micah could almost see Reed's pale shirt, clean boots, blue pen moving across paper. I needed money, Tobin said. My wife's medication went up again. Bank was calling twice a week. Reed knew all that. Funny how men like him always know where a roof leaks. What did you lease? Old hay barn near the wash, not the big one, smaller. Tin roof, bad door. Tobin swallowed. They paid 3 months in advance. And then? Tobin's fingers touched the pill case in his pocket. And then trucks came after dark. Not every night. Enough. I told myself it was parts, feed, supplies. Then I heard one of them. He looked at Rook. The dog sat down. Only that. A simple movement. Quiet, deliberate. A creature once held behind metal choosing to sit in open sunlight before a man who had not chosen bravely enough. Tobin's face broke. He turned away, but not fast enough. "I went down there," he whispered. "Only once. I saw crates. I saw paperwork taped to one. Crown Mesa. I did not open anything. I should have. I know that. I carried that knowing back to the house like a hot coal and put it under my own pillow." Micah felt anger rise. Not the clean anger of battle. A slower anger. One that wanted somewhere to go and found no easy target. Tobin had been wrong. Tobin had also been afraid. The world loved simple monsters because simple monsters made judgment feel clean. Men like Tobin made judgment sit in the dust and work harder. "Why not call someone?" Micah asked. Tobin gave a small, bitter laugh. "And say what? I rented a barn I should not have rented, heard what I should not have ignored, and now the man holding my contract says the penalty will take my land?" Calder already had liens ready. Reed had copies. They made fear look notarized. Rook rose and took 3 slow steps closer. Tobin flinched at first, then held still. The dog stopped just beyond arm's reach. For a long moment, the old man and the shepherd looked at each other. Tobin did not try to pet him. Some apologies did not deserve hands. "I am sorry," he said. Rook only watched. Micah saw then what he hadn't seen before. Rook was not simply evidence of what had been done. He was evidence of what people had allowed themselves not to know. He made silence visible. He turned excuses into something with eyes. Tobin wiped his face with the heel of his hand. "What do I do?" he asked. Micah took out Elena's card. "You tell the truth before Reed writes another version." Tobin stared at the card as if it weighed 50 pounds. Then he took it. By evening, Elena had Tobin's preliminary statement recorded on her small silver device at Micah's kitchen table. Tobin sat stiffly, hat in both hands, voice shaking but clear enough. Mara was there too, not because she needed to be, but because Tobin had looked less likely to run with someone practical in the room. He admitted to leasing the barn. He described Reed's contract, the night trucks, the Crown Mesa label, the sound that had made him stop sleeping well. He did not make himself a hero. That gave his statement strength. Elena asked careful questions. Dates, vehicle descriptions, payment method, names, whether Calder had spoken directly or through Reed. Tobin answered what he knew and admitted what he did not. When he was done, he looked older, also lighter, not forgiven perhaps, but less buried. Rook lay by the mudroom throughout, eyes open. When Tobin left, he paused at the door. The shepherd lifted his head. Tobin touched the brim of his hat, not to Micah, not to Elena, but to Rook. "Thank you," he said. Rook did not wag his tail. Micah was glad. Some moments did not need decoration. The next morning, Elena moved quickly. She contacted a federal magistrate for an expanded warrant request, added Tobin's statement to the file, attached Mara's veterinary documentation, Micah's camera footage, property maps, and the photos of the old maintenance strip. Mara completed a formal condition report, careful with language, strict with facts. Micah handed over duplicate copies of every image from the night he found Rook and every note involving the service trucks. For the first time since the cage, it felt as if the truth had weight. Not enough to crush the lie yet, but enough to lean against it. Then Reed Hask answered. He did not come to Micah's gate this time. He went to the county. By noon, Micah received a call from the Animal Control Office. The woman on the line sounded uncomfortable before she said his name. "Mr. Sandoval, we have received a formal ownership inquiry regarding the shepherd-type dog currently in your care." Micah looked through the window. Rook was under the mesquite, watching a pair of quail cross the yard like nervous royalty. "From who?" Micah asked. Crown Mesa working dogs, with supporting documentation through Silver Spur Ranch. Micah closed his eyes. Clean paper. Documentation saying what? That the animal is a registered working dog that may have been removed from an associated holding property after going missing. He was in a locked cage with no water. I understand, sir. Dr. Voss's report is in the file. Then read it. A pause. I have, sir. The quiet on the line told him more than the words. What do they want? Micah asked. Temporary custody verification. Because the microchip is unreadable and the submitted records include identifying descriptions, the county is requesting the dog be transferred to a neutral holding facility while ownership is reviewed. Micah's fingers tightened around the phone. No. Rook looked toward the house. Micah lowered his voice. No. He stays here under veterinary supervision. I am sorry, Mr. Sandoval. A deputy will accompany the transfer officer. Elena arrived before the county vehicle did. So did Mara. That told Micah enough. Mara stepped out of her van with her jaw locked. Elena's face had gone still in the way a desert sky goes still before a storm. They are using the gap, Elena said. What gap? The damaged chip, the disputed access strip, the fact Crown Mesa got paperwork filed before the warrant expanded. She looked toward Rook. This does not mean they win. It means they take him. It means they try to make you the problem if you refuse. Micah stared at her. Every instinct in him rose like a drawn blade. He could see the path his anger wanted. Stand in the yard, refuse entry, force them to say his name into a radio, make the world admit what it was doing. Old training moved inside him, not as thought but as geometry. Doorways, angles, approach, cover, distance. Rook came to stand beside him, not behind. Beside. That nearly undid him. Mara stepped closer. Micah. He did not look at her. She said, If you fight them on your porch, Reed wins by dinner. Elena's voice was quieter. If you let us fight this through the record, we still have room to move. The county vehicle appeared in the distance, followed by a tan patrol SUV. Dust rose behind them. Micah saw the deputy step out first. Deputy Amos Vale was 52, maybe older in the eyes. He had a tired face, a neat salt and pepper mustache, and the posture of a man who had spent too many years carrying policies written by people who never stood in yards like this. His tan uniform was clean, but worn at the knees. A small horseshoe keychain hung from his belt, turning once in the dry wind. He looked at Micah, then at Rook. Regret passed over his face before duty covered it. Mr. Sandoval, Amos said, I do not like this. Then do not do it. The deputy's mouth tightened. I have an order for temporary neutral hold pending ownership review. He is not a suitcase. No, Amos said softly. He is not. The transfer officer brought out a transport crate. Rook saw it. His body lowered. Mara swore under her breath, not loudly, but with feeling. Micah crouched beside Rook. The dog was trembling, but he did not run. His amber eyes stayed on Micah's face. No blame, no confusion, only that terrible, steady trust that wounded creatures sometimes gave before humans proved whether they deserved it. Micah placed his hand against Rook's chest. He wanted to say he would not let them take him. He wanted to make a promise simple enough for the dog to understand. But a false promise would be another kind of cage. So he said the hardest true thing. I am still here. Rook's breath shook under his palm. They are not taking you back to where you were, Micah said. He looked at Amos when he said it. You hear me? Amos swallowed. He goes to county hold. Documented intake. Dr. Voss can submit care restrictions. Ms. Cross can attach a federal notice. Elena stepped in. And no release to Crown Mesa or Silver Spur without my office being notified. Amos nodded. I will put that in writing. Reed had made fear look notarized. Now they would make protection look notarized too. It was not enough. It was what they had. Micah guided Rook toward the crate himself because he would not let a stranger force him. Rook resisted once at the entrance, a small backward pull that went through Micah like a hook. Micah knelt, placed the old army blanket inside, and waited. "Straight line," he whispered. "That is what we do, remember?" Rook looked at him, then stepped in. The latch closed. Not loud. Still, Rook flinched. Micah stood very slowly. The transfer officer lifted the crate into the vehicle. Mara handed over written care instructions with the expression of a woman daring anyone to ignore them. Elena spoke low with Amos, every sentence precise, every word another thread tied to Rook's safety. Micah heard none of it clearly. He saw only Rook behind the small metal door. The shepherd did not bark. He did not bite. He did not throw himself against the crate. He simply looked at Micah through the grid. And because there was no accusation in that look, it hurt worse. The county vehicle pulled away in a slow drift of dust. Rook's amber eyes remained visible until the angle changed and the road took him. Micah stood in the yard long after the vehicles were gone. The mesquite tree threw a narrow strip of shade across the empty place where Rook had been lying that morning. It looked absurdly like a line drawn on a battlefield after the soldier beside you had been ordered away. Mara came up beside him. Elena stood on his other side. Neither woman spoke. Good, Micah thought. If either one had said it would be all right, he might have broken something. Instead, he looked down at his right hand. His thumb had found the faded Navy SEAL tattoo without his permission. He forced his hand open. Then he turned toward the house. On the kitchen table, the folders waited. The map waited. The clean papers waited. Micah Sandoval walked inside and picked up his pencil. If Reed Hask wanted to fight with documents, then documents would learn how heavy a repairman's truth could become. Without Rook, the house grew teeth again. Micah Sandoval felt it before sunset. The rooms stretched wider than they had any right to be. The hallway looked too long. The bedroom looked too quiet. The kitchen held its breath around every cup, every chair, every shadow beneath the table. Even the mudroom threshold seemed wrong, stripped of the black and gold shape that had guarded it with one tipped ear and eyes like amber lanterns. Micah stood in the center of the house and listened. A pipe clicked in the wall. The refrigerator hummed. Wind dragged dry branches along the siding. Ordinary sounds. That was the problem. Ordinary sounds were the best liars. He checked the front door, then the back door, then the kitchen window, then the bathroom window. He made it to the hallway, stopped, and turned back toward the front door again. His hand touched the deadbolt. The metal was cool under his thumb. For a moment, shame moved through him, familiar as old dust. He knew this ritual, knew the shape of it, the useless hunger of it. No number of checks had ever made him safe. It only made the fear quieter for a few minutes, the way a bone tossed into the dark might keep a wolf busy, but never convince it to leave. Still, his fingers tightened. Then he saw Rook in his mind. Not as he had looked behind the transport crate door, though that image had burned itself into Micah's chest. He saw him in the kitchen, trembling between Micah and the front door, afraid of the same engine, the same white sweep of headlights, yet standing anyway. "You're scared too, and you still got between me and the door." Micah released the deadbolt. He did not feel brave. He felt angry. That was useful enough. The phone rang at 8:18. Elena Cross did not waste time with greeting. "Crown Mesa's paperwork is bad." Micah closed his eyes. "Bad how?" "Too clean in the wrong places, transfer dates overwritten, dog identification codes that do not match the format they used during the period claimed, a veterinary sign-off from a name attached to an older transport inquiry." "Enough to stop this?" "Enough to start pulling threads, not enough by itself to undo the county hole tonight." Micah looked toward the mudroom where Rook's water bowl still sat full. Where is he? County hold officially. That sounds like a sentence with a trapdoor. It may be. Elena's voice lowered. Deputy Amos Vale called me off the record. He thinks the transfer order that moved Rook into neutral hold was followed by another request. What kind of request? A secondary transport authorization, supposedly for intake verification at a partner facility. Micah's hand curled around the edge of the kitchen counter. Crown Mesa. A contractor connected to them. Different name, same address cluster. When? Before dawn, if Amos reads the routing correctly. For a second, the house went very still. Then it seemed to tilt. Micah looked at the doors he had checked, the windows he had checked, the empty threshold he could not protect by turning locks. Rook had been taken with forms, stamps, polite voices, and a crate that closed softly. Now more paper was trying to move him again before truth could catch up. "What do you need?" he asked. "Facts, eyes, your knowledge of the roads, not a rescue mission." "I know." "I need to hear you say it." Micah's jaw tightened. Elena waited. He hated that she waited like that, hated that she understood him well enough to require words. "I will not go in alone," he said. "And?" "I will not approach Silver Spur." "And?" He exhaled through his nose. "I will not solve this with old training and bad sleep." "Good," Elena said, "because I need you useful, not legendary." Under different circumstances, he might have smiled. Tonight, he looked at the map on the table. "What roads are we watching?" Elena named 3. Micah crossed out 2 immediately. "No? You are certain? Truck that size, loaded, moving before dawn? They will not take Marrowcut. Sand is soft after the wind shift, and the Eastern Cattle Road has a washout near the 3rd culvert. If they are trying to move quiet and heavy, they need the old pump road." There was silence on the line. Then Elena said, "The one by the dry riverbed?" "Yes." "Why?" "Hardpack, no houses for 6 miles. Old service junction near the abandoned station. Plenty of room to switch vehicles." Micah's pencil moved over the map, circling the dead pump station he had not visited in years. Once it had served 3 ranches and a shallow well system that gave up during a brutal summer. After the aquifer dropped, the station had been abandoned, left with its tanks, pipes, and concrete pad baking under the sun like the bones of some defeated animal. A dead well, a place where water used to rise. It made a dark kind of sense. Elena's voice sharpened. "Send me the coordinates. Stay back. If you see movement, plates, vehicle count, direction, nothing more." "Understood." "Micah," he paused. "If Rook is there, you still stay back." There it was, the command beneath the plan. Micah looked toward the shed beyond the window. Empty doorway, empty shade beneath the mesquite. Empty place where a wounded guardian had chosen to keep watch. "I heard you," he said. "That is not the same as agreeing." "No," Micah said, "but it is the best answer you are getting." He hung up before Elena could decide whether to be irritated or grateful. At 9:06, Tobin Weller called. The old rancher's voice was rough and low, as if he were speaking from inside a closet, though the wind whistled faintly behind him. "Micah." "Tobin?" "They're moving something." Micah's spine tightened. "Who?" "Silver Spur men. Maybe Crown Mesa. I do not know. Trucks went past my lower field 20 minutes ago. Lights low. 2 box bodies, 1 white utility, 1 dark pickup. They are not taking the main road." "Where are they headed?" "The Wash Road." Tobin swallowed audibly. "I heard one of them say they had to clear before first light." Micah wrote the time down. "What exactly did you hear?" "Not much. Enough. Big load. Split point. One man said something about papers being good through morning." "Papers good through morning? A sentence could smell rotten even through a phone." "Tobin," Micah said. "Call Elena. Tell her exactly that. Do not dress it up." "I already did." Micah stopped. The old man breathed unevenly. "I should have done things sooner, I know that, but I called her first this time." For a moment, Micah had no words. Outside, the desert wind moved against the house, and for once it did not sound like warning. It sounded like an old witness turning its head. "Good," Micah said. It was not forgiveness, it was not absolution, but it was something a man like Tobin could stand on for the next hard hour. By 10:30, Micah had his truck ready. Not armed for war, prepared for roads, water, flashlight, binoculars, phone charger, paper map, small camera, spare fuel can, tow strap, first aid kit. The old pipe wrench with MS scratched into the handle. He stood over the wrench longer than necessary. Then he put it in the toolbox, not the cab. A tool, not a weapon. That distinction mattered tonight. Before leaving, he moved through the house once more. Front door, back door, kitchen window, bathroom window. At the front door, his hand paused. Only once. "Good enough," he said to the empty house. The words felt strange, almost rude. He left. The desert at night had no walls, yet it could close around a man. Micah drove without the overhead cabin light, taking the county road first, then cutting onto a service track that paralleled the wash. He kept his headlights low where he could and killed them entirely when the moon gave enough shape to the land. The truck crept over hard dirt, tires whispering through dust. The world outside was black and silver. Mesquite crouched like animals. Fence posts flickered by like old bones. Far away, the faint red blink of a tower light marked civilization pretending it had authority over the dark. Micah kept distance. That was the discipline of the night. He was not chasing. He was not confronting. He was not the blade at the front of the spear. He was a man in an old pickup, using a lifetime of noticing roads to help the right people arrive at the right place. Still, his body remembered other nights. At the first distant engine note, his pulse jumped. At the clank of something metal carried on wind, his mouth went dry. At the sight of low headlights moving across the basin ahead, every part of him wanted to become the younger man he had once been. The man trained to close distance, read angles, move hard, end uncertainty by entering it. Instead, he stopped the truck behind a low ridge and pressed one palm against the steering wheel. Leather, dust, present. He breathed in for 4 counts, out for 6, again. The metal sound came again, faint and ugly. A crate door, a tailgate, a chain, something ordinary doing the work of something cruel. His chest tightened. Then memory offered him Rook. Not in the crate, not being taken away. Standing in the kitchen, terrified and stubborn, placing his own shaking body between Micah and the door. Micah's breathing steadied. "You stood," he whispered into the dark. "So do I." He raised the binoculars. The convoy moved below him along the old pump road, slower than traffic, faster than caution. 2 box trucks with service markings too muddy to read. A white utility truck with pipe strapped to one side. A dark pickup trailing behind. No bright logos. No honest purpose. Micah took photos as each vehicle crossed a patch of moonlit road. Plate partial, vehicle count, direction, time. He sent everything to Elena. Her reply came less than a minute later. Received. Maintain distance. Teams moving. Micah almost typed, "Hurry." He did not. Words did not make tires turn faster. The convoy reached the fork where the main track bent toward Silver Spur's outer fence, and the old pump road dropped toward the dry riverbed. Micah watched the lead truck slow. If they took the fence road, Elena's team might lose them in private property and legal delays. If they took the pump road... The lead truck turned toward the dry riverbed. Micah let out a breath he had not known he was holding. He waited until the last vehicle disappeared around the bend before starting his engine again. The old pump road was not a road so much as a memory of one. Once, county maintenance trucks had used it to service the water station. Now it ran pale through low brush and sand pockets, broken in places where summer storms had cut shallow scars across it. A driver who did not know it would rush and get stuck. A driver who knew it would move slowly and trust the hard pack. Micah knew every bad patch. He knew where the road dipped and hid headlights. He knew where sound carried. He knew where there was no cell service for half a mile, and where a man could climb a ridge and catch one bar if he held the phone high like an offering to a stingy god. He did not follow too close. Twice he stopped completely and let the convoy's dust settle. Once he left the truck and moved on foot to the top of a shallow rise, crouching beside a barrel cactus. From there he saw the trucks pass under the skeletal frame of an old windmill. The moon silvered their roofs. One truck rocked heavily over a rut, and from inside came a muffled chorus of movement. Not loud, not clear. Enough. Micah closed his eyes. Anger rose again, hot and clean. He put it to work taking more photographs. At 12:17, Elena called. "Status?" Convoy confirmed. 4 vehicles. "Heading to the old station." "Are you visible?" "No." "Stay that way." "Teams?" "Moving in stages. We need probable cause tied to active transport and location. Your images help." "They are not going past the station tonight," Micah said. "You know that how?" "The road beyond the station washed out 2 summers ago. Box trucks cannot cross it loaded. If they go there, it is to stop." Elena paused. "Good. Send me exact coordinates for approach options." He gave them from memory. North service cut, bad for low clearance. South wash approach, hidden but soft sand. Old pipe trench from west side, narrow but walkable. There was another silence. "You really do know this place?" "I fixed what kept it alive before it died." That landed somewhere neither of them wanted to examine. Elena's voice softened by half a shade. "Do not let that make you sentimental." Too late. He ended the call and kept moving. By 1:03 the old pump station came into view. It sat in a shallow basin near the dry riverbed, a low concrete building with rusted vents, 2 dead water tanks, and the crooked remains of a chain-link fence. In moonlight, the tanks looked like blind giants kneeling in the sand. Once, pipes had carried water from this place to ranches that believed the well would last forever. Now, yellow work lights glowed inside the open bay. The convoy had stopped. Micah pulled behind a ridge of caliche and cut the engine. The sudden silence rang in his ears. He took the binoculars and climbed low, up the slope, boots careful, body remembering quiet without becoming a ghost of war. From the top, he could see the yard. Men moved between the trucks. Not many. Enough. Their voices carried in fragments, flattened by distance and wind. Doors opened and closed. Clipboards passed from hand to hand. One man in a pale shirt stood too straight near the bay entrance. Even from that distance, Micah knew him. Clean boots, Reed Hask. Micah's hand tightened around the binoculars. He scanned the vehicles one by one. Box truck, second box truck, white utility truck, dark pickup. Then, partly hidden near the side of the building, a county-style animal transport vehicle sat under the weak yellow spill of a lamp. Micah stopped breathing. He adjusted focus. There. In the rear holding section, behind a small metal grid, stood a black and gold shape. Too thin, left ear tipped, head high despite the crate around him. Rook. For a moment, everything in Micah narrowed to the size of that small barred window. The maps vanished. The legal strategy vanished. Elena's warnings vanished. There was only the dog who had stood between him and the door, now standing inside another man's plan. Micah's body moved before thought could command it. One knee shifted forward in the dirt. Then he stopped. No, Rook needed him useful, not legendary. Micah forced himself back down behind the ridge. His hands shook once. He let them. Then he lifted the camera and took the picture. Vehicle. Position. Time. Rook visible. He sent it to Elena. For several seconds, no response came. Then his phone buzzed. Confirmed. Hold position. Hold position. The two hardest words in the language. Below, wind moved through the basin and carried dust across the lights. Rook turned his head suddenly toward the dark ridge. Micah froze. The dog could not see him. The distance was too far, the night too thick. But the wind had changed. Rook lifted his nose, his amber eyes fixed on the darkness where Micah crouched. Micah did not wave, did not speak, did not move. Still, something passed between them across the dead basin, across rusted tanks and false papers and all the cruel distance men had tried to put in the way. Rook stood taller. Micah lowered his forehead briefly to the back of his hand. "I'm here," he whispered. The desert kept the words. Below, the old pump station glowed like a dying furnace before dawn, and Micah Sandoval, hidden on the ridge above it, waited for the night to break. The old pump station waited in the basin like a dead heart. Micah Sandoval lay behind the ridge with his elbows in the dirt, binoculars pressed to his eyes, and the whole desert breathing around him. Below, yellow work lights glowed against rusted tanks and cracked concrete. Trucks sat in crooked positions around the building, not parked like honest vehicles, but placed like pieces on a board. Two box trucks near the open bay. The white utility truck with pipes strapped to its side. A dark pickup by the fence. And the county-style transport vehicle half hidden in the lampglow, where Rook stood behind a small metal grid, head high, body too thin, left ear tipped against the night. Micah had already sent the image to Elena. Confirmed. Hold position. Those words sat in his phone like stones. The younger version of him would have hated them. The younger version would have counted distance, angles, cover, men, doors. He would have made a plan with his body before his mind had finished approving it. But that man had lived too long at the edge of thunder. He had mistaken motion for control more than once. Tonight, Rook needed something harder than motion. He needed Micah to wait. A faint crackle came through Micah's earpiece. Elena's voice, low and controlled. "Sandoval, give me west approach again." Micah shifted, careful not to silhouette himself against the ridge. Old pipe trench, starts behind the second tank, runs along the dry drainage cut. Overgrown, but walkable. Cameras are pointed toward the main road and the bay. They will not expect movement from the west. Vehicle access? No, foot only. Sand gets soft after 20 yards if you bring weight through there. Obstructions? Broken concrete, wire, mesquite roots. Watch the left side near the culvert. There is a drop. A pause. Then Elena said, "Copy." Another voice entered, older, strained but steady. Deputy Amos Vale. "Federal units are staging South Wash, county holding back until signal." Micah could picture him even without looking. Tan uniform, tired eyes, old horseshoe keychain turning against his belt while he tried to repair a mistake made in his own name. Amos was not a heroic man in the way stories like to polish heroes. He was a man who had signed the wrong paper, then decided not to hide behind it. That mattered. "Dr. Voss is with rescue intake," Elena said. "Micah, once we move, you stay behind the ridge until I call you in." His jaw tightened. "Say it," she added. He stared at the transport vehicle. Rook shifted behind the grid. "I stay behind the ridge until called." "Good. Do not make me regret being useful." "Then remain useful." Elena cut the line. Micah breathed through his nose and lowered the binoculars. Below, men moved in and out of the bay. Their voices reached him in torn pieces. Not enough words to carry meaning, but enough tone to carry impatience. Clipboards passed between hands. A crate door clicked. Somewhere inside the station, a dog's nails scratched lightly against plastic. The sound traveled up the basin and found Micah's chest. He closed his eyes. Not now. He pressed his palm into the dirt. Earth, stone, wind, present. The desert did not comfort him. The desert was not kind, but it was honest. It held what happened on its surface and let time decide what would remain. A footprint, a tire mark, a broken sign, a cage hidden under a tarp. Nothing disappeared completely out here. It only waited for someone patient enough to read the dust. Micah opened his eyes. Movement began on the west side. At first it was nothing, then the dry grass near the pipe trench bent in a pattern the wind had not made. Dark shapes moved low along the drainage cut. Federal officers, quiet and controlled, following the path Micah had given them. Elena led from the second position rather than the first, not because she lacked courage, but because she understood command. Her job was to see the whole board. Mara's rescue van waited farther back in the shadows beyond the South Wash. Its lights were off. Even from the ridge, Micah imagined her there with her red notebook, medical kits ready, jaw set against all the things she would not allow herself to say until the animals were safe. The teams closed in. No shouting yet, no sirens, no grand entrance. Precision had its own kind of thunder. Inside the old station, the air smelled of dust, diesel, and stale metal. Micah would learn that later. In that moment, from the ridge, he only saw the bay light spill across concrete and the figures turning suddenly when Elena's voice cut through the basin. "Federal officers, step away from the vehicles, hands visible." The whole scene snapped tight. One man dropped a clipboard. Another froze beside the box truck. Calder Vane came out of the bay like a bull forced from a gate. His cream shirt was open at the throat, his face dark with fury, silver ring flashing under the work light. He looked less like a lord of the ranch now, and more like a man caught holding the wrong door open. "What is this?" Calder barked. Elena's voice stayed level. "An active transport interdiction under federal authority. Step away from the vehicle. You are on private property." "No," Amos said, stepping into view from the south side with 2 county officers behind him. His voice was not loud, but it carried. "This station sits on county-maintained access land under an expired utility easement, and that transport vehicle was moved under a county hold order I am now formally contesting." Calder turned on him. "Vale, you better think carefully." Amos touched the paper in his hand. It shook slightly. He noticed, steadied it, and continued. "I am." Reed Hask appeared behind Calder. Of course he did. Pale shirt, clean lines, dark folder, blue pen clipped neatly near the spine. Even standing beside box trucks before dawn, he looked like a man prepared to make the world apologize for misunderstanding him. "There has been a procedural mistake," Reed said. "These animals are being transferred under documented agreements with Crown Mesa working dogs and associated facilities. I have records." Elena looked at him. "Good," she said. "So do we." For the first time, Reed's expression faltered. Only slightly. But Micah saw it through the binoculars. Elena raised a hand. Officers moved to the trucks. The first bay door opened. A sound came out. Not a howl, not chaos. Something smaller and worse in its restraint. Nails shifting against crate floors, soft panting, collars touching plastic. The faint metal tremble of cages occupied by creatures that had learned not to waste fear on noise. Mara moved in only after Elena gave the signal. She crossed the yard fast, rescue team behind her. Her face had become very still, not blank, still, the way deep wells look still from above while holding dark water far below. She knelt beside the first crate and spoke to the dog inside. Micah could not hear the words. He did not need to. He saw the dog's nose move toward her fingers. That nearly undid him more than Calder's anger had. Reed was speaking again, faster now. Those crates are sealed under transfer documentation. Any interference risks contamination of chain of custody and contractual— Elena, Amos interrupted. He held up a page. The secondary routing request was signed under the partner facility code you flagged. It was filed before county intake was completed. Elena took it, scanned it, and looked at Reed. You requested transport before the animal was legally cleared from neutral hold. Reed's mouth tightened. Administrative timing. For a dog you claimed was missing, Elena said, before the county confirmed identity. Calder stepped forward. This is nonsense. You people are twisting paperwork because a pump man got emotional over a stray. Micah's grip on the binoculars tightened. Pump man. Emotional. Stray. 3 words Reed might have chosen himself. 3 clean little fences meant to pen the truth. Elena did not look toward the ridge. She did not need to. Mr. Sandoval provided vehicle data, route documentation, and time-stamped images, she said. Dr. Voss provided veterinary condition reports. Mr. Weller provided a recorded statement regarding lease storage and Crown Mesa labels. Deputy Vale has identified irregular county transfer routing, and your convoy is currently staged at a closed utility station with multiple animals not matching the submitted transport manifest. The silence after that had weight, not victory, weight, the kind that made lies start breathing harder. Calder's ring struck the side of the truck once, a dry metallic click. From the transport vehicle, Rook reacted. He did not bark. He rose. Even through distance, Micah saw the dog's body stiffen, head turning toward Calder's hand. Elena saw it too. So did Amos. So did Mara. A small thing, a dog remembering a sound, not proof by itself, but in a yard full of forged timing, false routes, hidden crates, and men suddenly unwilling to meet anyone's eyes, it was another thread. Elena gave the signal. The officers moved. There was no great fight, no cinematic storm of fists and fury, just commands, hands guided away from pockets, men placed against vehicles, radios speaking in clipped voices, documents collected, phones bagged, truck doors secured. Calder argued until his voice began to sound less like authority and more like noise. Reed kept insisting on procedure even as procedure turned its face toward him. "Do you have any idea who owns the land around here?" Calder snapped. Elena answered while sealing a folder in an evidence bag. "At the moment, I am more interested in who thought they owned the dogs." That was when Micah's earpiece crackled. "Sandoval," Elena said. "You can come down, slow, west side." He was already moving before the last word finished, then caught himself and slowed. Useful, not legendary. He took the pipe trench down, boots sliding once on loose dirt, one hand brushing dry grass for balance. The closer he came to the station, the more the sounds separated. Radio chatter, truck engines cooling, a soft whine from one of the crates, Mara's low voice, the snap of gloves, Calder protesting in the background, like a man trying to command a storm after the roof was already gone. Micah stopped at the edge of the yard until Elena saw him. She gave one short nod. The transport vehicle stood near the side lamp. Rook was inside. Up close, the dog looked both better and worse than Micah's mind had allowed. Better because he was alive, standing, eyes clear. Worse because the crate had taken something from his posture. His body was tight with old obedience to confinement, as if the metal around him had reminded his bones of rules they hated. Micah approached the crate and stopped 3 feet away. Rook's amber eyes fixed on him. For a moment, nobody else existed. Not Elena, not Mara, not Calder, not the old pump station or the rusted tanks or the false papers being gathered like dead leaves. Only Micah, Rook, and the small barred door between them. Mara came up beside him with a key handed over by Amos. "You want me to open it?" she asked. Micah shook his head. He crouched. Not too close, just as he had crouched before the rusted cage on Lenora's maintenance strip. He placed his palm flat on the ground, fingers open in the dust. Rook's eyes dropped to the hand. Micah heard his own voice come out rough and quiet. "Rook!" The dog's tipped ear shifted. "Fortress still stands." Rook trembled. Micah stayed still. Around them, the rescue continued. Dogs were being carried, guided, calmed, documented. Calder was being read his restrictions. Reed was asking for a lawyer, in a tone that suggested the word itself should polish the air. But Micah waited. Rook had been forced enough. At last Mara unlocked the crate. The latch gave a small click. Rook flinched. Micah did not move. The door opened. For a few seconds, Rook remained inside. Open space had confused him once before. It confused him now. Freedom, offered too suddenly, could look like another trick. "You choose," Micah whispered. The shepherd lowered his head and took one step, then another. His paws touched concrete. He stood outside the crate, shaking, black saddle dusty under the yellow light, tan legs braced as if the earth might disappear. His gaze swept the yard, the trucks, the people, the lights, the ring on Calder's hand, the folder in Reed's grip, Mara kneeling beside another crate, Elena watching every moving piece. Then he stepped into Micah. Not dramatically, not like a trained dog completing a command. He simply walked forward until his head pressed against Micah's chest. Micah closed one arm around him gently, leaving him room to pull away. Rook did not pull away. Micah bowed his head over the dog's neck. He did not feel triumph. Triumph was too loud, too clean, too much like something men invented after the dust settled. What he felt was smaller and holier. A living creature had been given back one choice, and he had chosen to come home. Mara touched Micah's shoulder once, then moved away before the moment became too crowded. A sharp sound cut through the yard. Not danger, a crate shifting near the old side building. Rook lifted his head. His body changed. Micah felt it under his hand, the sudden line of attention. Not panic, recognition. The dog turned toward a narrow storage room attached to the back of the station, half covered by corrugated tin and desert grass. Its door hung crooked, secured with a simple latch. "Rook," Micah said softly. The dog moved, not fast, not frenzied. He walked toward the storage room with a grim certainty that made Micah follow without needing to ask why. Elena noticed. "Sandoval? He knows that place. Do not open it." Micah stopped. Useful. Elena came forward with Amos and one federal officer. She checked the latch, photographed it, then opened the door. Dust breathed out. Inside were shelves, old pipe fittings, cracked plastic bins, and file boxes stacked beneath a tarp. Not hidden well enough to be genius. Hidden with the arrogance of men who believed nobody would come through the old pipe trench. Elena pulled one box into the light. Crown Mesa labels, lease copies, storage agreements, transport manifests, lists of ranch properties, names, dates, routes, partner facility codes. Reed Hask's blue ink initials appeared again and again. Amos stared at the pages. His face changed slowly, as if each line struck him somewhere deeper than pride. "They used county forms," he said. Elena flipped through the manifest. "They used everyone's forms." Mara joined them, eyes scanning one list, then another. "These are animal counts." Micah looked down at Rook. The dog stood at the doorway of the storage room, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the boxes. He did not enter. He did not need to. Whatever memory had brought him here had already done its work. Micah rested a hand lightly on his back. "You did enough," he said. Rook leaned into the touch. Behind them, Reed's voice rose once, then broke off when he saw Elena holding the file box. His clean papers were no longer clean. They were evidence. Dawn came slowly. It did not burst over the desert. It seeped in, pale gold at first, then rose along the edges of the rusted tanks, the roofs of the trucks, the tired faces of the officers and rescuers. The old pump station, dead for years, stood in the new light like a ruin from a forgotten kingdom. But around it, life moved. Dogs were lifted gently into rescue vans. Water bowls were set out. Mara moved from crate to crate, her anger quiet, her hands steady. Amos documented the county transport vehicle with the grim focus of a man determined never again to let paper outrun conscience. Calder Vane was escorted away, still speaking, but fewer people listened each time he opened his mouth. Reed Hask said nothing now. That was better. The desert had taken his polished voice and given him dust. Micah stood beside Rook, near the edge of the yard, while Elena coordinated the final vehicle search. Rook's body leaned against his leg, not for balance, not entirely, for contact. The sun lifted above the basin. The dry riverbed turned copper. The road beyond the station stretched eastward, pale and open. Micah looked at that horizon and waited for the old calculation to arrive. Distance, threat, movement, concealment, danger. It came, but not alone. Beside it came the weight of Rook against his leg, Mara's voice murmuring to a rescued dog, Elena's calm command, Amos writing down the truth, and the sound of water remembered by a place that had forgotten it. For the first time in years, the horizon did not look only like something that could bring trouble. It looked like a door. Micah lowered his hand to Rook's head. The shepherd's tipped ear brushed his fingers. "Come on," Micah said softly. "Let's watch the sun do its job." And together, man and dog stood in the desert while dawn laid its quiet gold over everything that had survived the night. Silver Spur Ranch did not look powerful with yellow tape across its gate. It looked tired. The big metal sign still hung over the entrance, the spur welded above the name catching the pale morning sun, but the land behind it had changed. Trucks no longer rolled in and out under dust and secrecy. Men no longer leaned on the fence as if the whole county belonged to their boots. The outer road had been blocked, the barns sealed, and federal notices fixed to doors that had once opened only for the right kind of silence. The desert did not celebrate. The desert was older than justice and too honest for applause. It simply watched. Micah Sandoval stood beside his pickup near the county road 3 days after the raid, one hand resting on the door, Rook at his side. The German Shepherd mix leaned lightly against his leg, black and gold coat cleaner now, though still rough at the edges. His left ear tipped in the wind. His amber eyes followed every movement near the sealed ranch with the grave attention of a creature who had learned that peace should be observed carefully before trusted. Micah understood that. A thing could be over on paper and still keep walking around inside the body. Elena Cross stood near the gate, speaking with 2 federal officers. Her dark hair moved slightly in the dry wind, her face composed, her field jacket zipped halfway against the morning chill. She had not smiled much since dawn at the old pump station. Micah suspected that people like Elena did not smile at endings until the paperwork survived them. Dr. Mara Voss had already come and gone from the temporary rescue intake twice that morning, her van full of blankets, medicine, and the kind of quiet fury that became useful only because she gave it a job. The rescued dogs had been moved to approved facilities in small groups. No crowding, no spectacle, no cheering strangers pressing phones through fences. Just careful hands, intake forms, water bowls, and voices kept low. Some of the dogs would heal enough to find homes. Some would need months. Some might never become what humans like to call normal. Mara had said that with her arms crossed and her eyes hard. "Normal is overrated," Micah had answered. Mara had looked at Rook, then back at him. "For once," she had said, "you are not wrong." That had been the closest thing to a blessing she gave. Silver Spur's closure did not clean the county overnight. It did not turn frightened ranchers into brave men by sunset. It did not erase the contracts Reed Hask had written or the fear Calder Vane had planted in dry soil. But something had shifted. The first truthful statement had made room for the second. Then the third, fear, once named aloud, lost part of its throne. Tobin Weller came to Micah's house that afternoon in a truck that rattled like it had been assembled from old gilt and baling wire. He climbed out slowly, hat in hand, shoulders bent beneath more than age. His faded flannel hung loose around him, and the small pill case in his shirt pocket pressed against the fabric, as always. Rook was lying beneath the mesquite when Tobin approached. The old man stopped several paces away. Micah stood near the shed, repairing a loose hinge, though the hinge could have waited. Work gave his hand somewhere to put their unease. "Signed the full statement," Tobin said. Micah nodded. "Federal office, county witness. Elena had me read it twice." Tobin looked down at his hat. "Did not make me sound better than I was?" "That is probably why it will help." Tobin swallowed. Rook lifted his head. The old rancher looked at the dog for a long moment. "I am not here to ask forgiveness." Micah set the screwdriver down. "Good." Tobin's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it did not survive. "I would not know what to do with it if I got it." The wind moved through the mesquite leaves, small and dry and patient. "I was scared," Tobin said. "That is the truth. Not the whole truth, maybe. There was money, too. My wife's medicine, the bank, the land. But mostly I was scared, and I let scared make decisions for me." Micah did not answer right away. There were easy things he could have said. Brave things, polished things, the kind of things people said when they wanted Payne to sit down and behave. He had no use for them. Rook rose and walked toward Tobin. Not quickly, not with trust, with choice. He stopped beside Micah, then sat. The dog did not offer warmth, but he did not offer judgment either. His presence did what it had done before. It made silence honest. Tobin's eyes filled, though he blinked hard against it. "I hope he knows," the old man whispered, "that I am trying now." Micah looked down at Rook. "He knows what people do," Micah said, "not what they wish they had done." Tobin took that like a fair sentence. He nodded once, placed his hat back on his head, and drove away lighter by perhaps one stone out of many. 2 days later, Deputy Amos Vale came by alone. He did not arrive in a hurry, and he did not park like a man expecting welcome. His tan county SUV stopped near the fence, and he sat inside for nearly a minute before stepping out. The old horseshoe keychain at his belt turned once in the wind. His uniform was clean, his face worn, and his eyes carried the plain discomfort of a man who had rehearsed an apology and then realized rehearsal would not help. Micah met him in the yard. Rook stood at Micah's left side. Amos removed his hat. "Mr. Sandoval," he said, "I let a bad piece of paper outrun good sense." Micah said nothing. Amos looked toward Rook, then away, as if the dog's steady gaze had more authority than his badge. "I followed procedure," Amos continued. "That is the part I keep wanting to hide behind. But procedure is supposed to protect the truth, not give cowards a hallway to move through." The words surprised Micah. Maybe they surprised Amos too. "I am sorry," the deputy said. The apology did not fix the night Rook had spent behind a county door. It did not erase the sight of the transport crate. It did not make Micah's hands forget the helplessness of watching the vehicle pull away. But it stood in the yard, plain and unarmed. That counted for something. Micah gave a single nod. Amos accepted it. No handshake, no speech, no warm music rising over dry grass. Some wrongs were not washed clean in a moment. Some were marked, named, and then met by the next right act. Before Amos left, he held up a folder. "I added my report to the federal file. Full chain. Who submitted what, when I should have questioned it? Will that hurt you? Maybe. Amos put his hat back on. Might help me more. Rook watched him walk back to the SUV. When the engine started, the dog tensed at the sound, but he did not retreat. Micah felt the tremor in him, faint but real. He lowered one hand to Rook's shoulder. The dog stayed. That was how the days went after Silver Spur. Not healed. Staying. Lenora Pike arrived the following Sunday with cornbread wrapped in a towel and a jar of prickly pear jelly balanced on top. She marched across Micah's yard with her mesquite stick in one hand, silver braid down her back, and the stern expression of a woman delivering supplies to a fort. Rook watched her from the porch. Lenora stopped and looked him over. Well now, you look less like a broom with opinions. Micah, who had been drinking coffee, nearly lost half of it. Rook blinked. I think he understood that, Micah said. Good. Humility builds character. She handed Micah the cornbread. The goats miss you. The goats miss water pressure. Same thing in their theology. Micah laughed. It came out rusty but not broken. Lenora heard it and said nothing about it, which was why Micah liked her more than most people. She understood that some laughter was like a wild bird. Point at it too quickly, and it flew away. She looked toward the shed. Mara said you're fixing that up. Trying. For dogs? When she needs quiet space. Lenora nodded. You always did know how to get water running where folks gave up digging. Micah looked at the cornbread in his hands. Dogs are not pumps. No, Lenora said. Pumps complain less. That time he laughed easier. The shed became a project. At first Micah told himself he was only making repairs. The roof leaked in 2 places. The back wall needed reinforcement. The concrete floor needed mats. The old workbench had to be moved. The door needed a quieter latch because Rook still flinched when metal snapped too sharply. Then Mara brought 2 folding crates. Then blankets. Then a supply shelf. Then a list taped to the wall in her sharp handwriting. Temporary quiet, hold only. Low traffic, no visitors, no sudden handling. Call before transfer. Micah stood under the list and read it twice. This is becoming official, he said. Mara, standing beside him with a roll of medical tape in her hand, did not look sorry. You have shade, distance, a good fence, and the personality of a locked cabinet. It is ideal. I feel complimented and insulted. You are growing. Rook lay near the doorway, head on his paws, watching them turn the place where he had first chosen to guard into something that might help others rest. He still did not like strangers. He still rose when vehicles came up the drive. He still walked the yard at night, pausing at corners, checking shadows, listening. But the patrol had changed. Before, Rook's body had carried fear like a command. Now it carried choice. Sometimes he made one slow circle of the yard, then returned to the porch and lay down with a deep sigh, as if reporting that the kingdom remained mostly ridiculous, but safe enough for now. Micah began making Rook's collar on a Tuesday evening. He did not buy one from town. He could have. It would have been easier, cleaner, less sentimental, which he generally preferred. Instead, he took a strip of brown leather from an old tool strap, cut it down, softened it with oil, and worked the edges until they would not rub. From the first pump housing he and Rook had inspected together after the raid. A dead little backyard pump that only needed a seal replaced. Micah saved a small piece of worn metal from the old nameplate. He polished it just enough, not too much. Then he engraved one word, Rook. The letters came out uneven. He considered starting over. Rook, sitting beside the workbench, sneezed. You got a comment? Micah asked. The dog placed his chin on the edge of the bench. Micah looked at the crooked letters again. Maybe perfect was the wrong language for a life being rebuilt. He fastened the small metal piece to the leather. When he finally buckled the collar around Rook's neck, he moved slowly. The dog stiffened at first. Micah stopped, waited. Let Rook decide whether the old fear would be the loudest voice in the room. Rook breathed once, then lowered his head. Micah buckled the collar. No force, no command, just leather, metal, and a name that belonged to him now because someone had spoken it with care. Rook shook himself after it was done, tags giving the softest little chime. Micah crouched before him. "There," he said, "officially employed as assistant pump supervisor." Rook's tail moved once. Only once. Micah chose to treat it as a standing ovation. Elena came by near the end of the week with a copy of the preliminary federal report. She did not bring ceremony. She brought a folder, 2 coffees, and the expression of someone who had slept poorly but won several arguments by email. "The station files opened up the whole route," she said, sitting at Micah's kitchen table. "Crown Mesa is under deeper investigation. Silver Spur is locked down. Several ranchers came forward after Tobin." Micah looked through the back door at Rook, who was lying in the shade with his new collar catching a small piece of light. "Fear likes company," he said. "So does courage," Elena replied. He looked at her. She shrugged. "Sometimes I say something decent. Do not make a habit of expecting it." He almost smiled. Elena placed the report on the table. "Your route data mattered. Without the pump road, we might have missed the transfer point." Micah took the folder but did not open it. Data was the easy part. What was the hard part? He looked at Rook again. Believing a scared dog was telling the truth. Elena followed his gaze. Rook lifted his head as if he knew he was being discussed and disapproved of the tone. Micah said, "Fear lies sometimes. Makes you see ghosts in every window. But sometimes fear is memory doing its best with no language." Elena was quiet. "That sounds like the beginning of wisdom," she said. "No," Micah said, "just bad sleep with a dog." This time Elena did smile. A little. The final night of the story came softly. Not because everything was solved. Life did not have that kind of manners. The federal case would take time. Mara's rescued dogs would take time. Tobin's conscience would take time. Amos's report would travel through offices where people might protect themselves before they protected the truth. Some ranchers would speak, some would not. Some wounds would scar cleanly, others would ache when the weather changed. But the wind that night was gentle. It moved over the desert without claws. Micah washed his coffee cup, set it upside down beside the sink, and turned off the kitchen light. Rook rose from the mudroom, stretched carefully, and followed him down the hallway with the solemn air of a creature escorting royalty that had forgotten its crown. "Do not start," Micah said. "I know where the bedroom is." Rook huffed. At the front door, Micah stopped. Habit arrived like an old raven. "Check it." He touched the lock. Front door, secure. He went to the back door. Secure. Kitchen window. Latched. Bathroom window. Latched. Then his feet carried him back to the front door. Of course they did. He stood before it, one hand lifted toward the deadbolt. The house was dark behind him. The desert waited beyond the wood. Somewhere far off, a truck moved along a road, low and distant. His pulse noticed. His body noticed. The old map inside him lit up with roads, doors, risks, exits. He did not hate himself for it. That was new. He simply stood there and let the fear speak. Then he looked down. Rook lay between the door and the dark, head resting on his front paws, amber eyes half open. Not rigid, not trembling, not trapped in the old command to guard or else. He was simply there, black and gold body settled across the threshold, new collar at his neck, one tipped ear listening to the world without surrendering to it. A dog at a door, a friend at a boundary. A small breathing answer. Micah's hand hovered near the lock. Rook's eyes shifted toward him. No command passed between them. No miracle. No sudden cure descending like rain on a desert that had forgotten clouds. Micah still knew he might wake before dawn. He still knew a truck door could make him flinch next week. He still knew the floor would call to him on bad nights with the old promise of readiness. But healing, he was beginning to learn, did not always arrive as a trumpet. Sometimes it was only a man standing in the dark, choosing not to turn a lock for the third time. Micah lowered his hand. "Good enough," he whispered. Rook closed his eyes. Micah turned away from the door. In the bedroom, the bed waited like a foreign country. For years he had treated it as a trap disguised in sheets. That night it looked only like a place a tired man might put down his bones. He sat on the edge first. Boots off, one breath, then another. He lay down. The ceiling did not fall. The house did not betray him. The desert did not rush the door. For a while he listened to Rook breathing in the hall. Slow, even, present. The sound was not a guard tower, not a radio, not a warning. It was warmer than that. Older, too. The sound of an animal who had chosen a home and was keeping company with the dark, not because he was forced to, but because love had made staying feel less like duty and more like peace. Near dawn, Micah woke once. His body did it before thought, old training sending him up through layers of sleep. For a second, he did not know where he was. Then he heard Rook, one soft exhale from the hallway. Micah turned his head. Through the open bedroom door, he saw the shepherd lying in the dim blue light, head raised now, watching him calmly. The collar tag glinted once. The left ear tipped forward. Micah could have gotten up. He could have checked the door. Instead, he stayed in bed. Rook lowered his head again. Outside, the Arizona sky began to pale. The desert remained wide. It kept its secrets, as all old gods do. It held dry washes, sealed ranch gates, rusted pump roads, and the memory of cages opened at last. It held loss. It held mercy. It held men who failed and men who tried again. It held dogs who had learned silence, and then, slowly, learned rest. Inside the small dust-colored house, two survivors kept watch in a different way. Not as prisoners of fear, not as weapons left loaded by the past, as companions, as witnesses, as living proof that a fortress did not always need higher walls. Sometimes it only needed a door, a dog, and enough trust to leave the lock alone. Micah and Rook remind us that healing does not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, through one honest witness, one brave choice, one loyal friend waiting by the door. Maybe grace is not always a grand miracle. Sometimes it is the strength to stop checking the same lock, the courage to trust again, and the mercy of knowing we do not have to face the dark alone. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us who has been your Rook in life, the one who helped you feel safe again. And if you believe stories of loyalty, hope, and second chances still matter, please subscribe and stay with us for the next journey. May peace find your home tonight, and may hope stand guard at your door.